Hello and welcome. My name is Mark Abadi. This is live, inspirational community event, community collaboration even. It is a show that brings to you luminaries and wisdom keepers and people who wear headphones when they're on phones in other rooms. And today's guest is the phenomenal priestess, priestess artist extraordinaire, headphones, priestess extraordinaire, Elizabeth Sciore-Jones. Elizabeth is going to be sharing on resurrecting the primal divine through visionary sculptures and experiential installations. Yes, she is. She holds temple spaces, ritual temple spaces, and it's very interesting. We're going to get into that. Elizabeth Sciore-Jones is a lifelong earth worshipper, a visionary artist, ordained Reverend Priestess, Reiki master, ritualist, wildcrafter, intuitive traveler, and a generational witch raised in the woods. She has degrees from the Schools of Visual Arts in New York, Herron School of Arts and Design in Indiana University, and she designs these fantastic grant-winning, award-winning collaborative ritual art projects. Fantastic, and I have been privileged to be part of the Divine Hive Temple that was at Burning Man and later Isis Oasis. Currently, her focus is in reaching out into the tingling void, linking contemporary temple installations to our primal source of sensation and visionary divinity. You can find more at Sciore-Jones, ESCIORE-Jones.com. You can see all the links in the videos below. So without further ado, let us go and introduce Elizabeth. Elizabeth.
Hey, hi. How are you doing, Mark Abadi?
Yes, good, except for my last minute tech problem that I had that you were a witness to. How are you? Where are you? What are you doing?
You know, I am keeping balanced, which I think is sort of the best thing that we can do in the times that we're in. And I am in a small town called Cottonwood, which is outside Sedona, Arizona, the sort of mecca of red rocks and vortexes and spiritualism in Arizona. And I'm really honestly, during the isolation period, I've really been focusing on making the goddesses, because I've done some small installations, but they're mainly just for the people I've been living with. You know, because there's no big events even really on the horizon to plan installations for. So when I am planning, it's like very, you know, distant future. So lots of concentration on the little things.
Right. Let's talk about these. You know, because you create these sacred spaces. And, you know, I come from a background of meditating upon nothingness. And in there lies a kind of disregard for the spaces that we hold, the sacred spaces, almost that it's, you know, religious. Can you talk about what it is? What's the point of creating sacredness, and even to the point where, you know, you're talking about creating these goddess statues? What's the point of it?
Yeah, so the point of creating, well, my point in creating sacred spaces and creating iconography to help worship the divine goddess, as well as just the divine in all of us, is to acknowledge the matter on Earth, right? Acknowledge that we're matter, that we're part of this planet. So when we're able to clear our minds, which is part, right, of the meditation on nothing, or, you know, in the Shambhala practices, or, you know, a lot of other practices, there's this clearing of the space, and it's like the concentration on just being in existence, right? And that's beautiful and amazing, and it takes a lot to get there. because our minds are chaotic and busy and very like, you know, we call it the monkey mind, the disordered space, right? And everybody's practice looks different, right? So from the premise that we are all on the earth, all of our practices look different. There is definitely, you know, when we do yoga, the goal is to do our physical yoga practice so we can clear our mind, so we can really sit down and do the meditation and really be one with that moment without the concentration on matter or ideas, right? And to get, I was just gonna say, there's lots of ways to get there, right? So it's like through the creation of like matter heavy space, right? We can create that, a re-examination of like what we do and who we are, and why we're here on this planet, right? In a way that like, instead of just constantly trying to focus on nothing, right? Because it's like, for a lot of people that it's almost impossible,
Right.
as a first or second step, right? So that's why we have temple spaces. I keep hitting her. That's why we have temples, right? That's why we have churches. That's why we have synagogues, is to go and to be in community, to go and to be in a space that changes our atmosphere so we can focus and concentrate and come together. And I feel like we can all bring that into our daily lives, particularly through technological and media saturation that's happening throughout all of our lives, really. Just, there's amazing advancements, and then there's a disconnection with the body, right? So if we go straight from media saturation to bypassing the physical issues, right, we end up with a spiritual bypass, right? Which may or may not happen depending on the individual, but for a lot of people, they experience that seesaw effect of spirituality. So it's like, I like concentrating on matter to kind of pull any sensation of people back in their bodies, bodies.
So it's a kind of grounding.
Yeah, a lot of ways to ground. And for me, I mean, I'm not separating myself from that practice. I very much find grounding in creating these goddesses. Like, I am literally working with the earth itself. And when I'm doing the installation practice, like, I'm working with, actually, you know, I'll just call it trash, but I'm working with other people's treasures that they've gotten rid of, right? So I'm doing a lot of recycling rather than, I don't buy new things. Like, anything you see in any of my installations is usually a recycled piece or something I got secondhand.
Right. Right. So again, I'm trying to understand this. You know, there seems to be a magic in ritual. Can you talk to what that is? Because again, it's like somewhere in our evolution, at least me coming from my Jewish background, you know, I see tradition, and I see it, and it's almost like I see the benefits of it, like, you know, it's tradition for the Jewish family to get round and Purim and to gather and everyone eat together, and I love that community. Have a party and a dinner party, great, and everyone be grateful for being there, excellent. But somewhere in our evolution, it seems like we're coming away from the religious rituals because somewhere to me, they seemed dead. They seemed unalive. So what is real ritual practice in comparison to, you know, like dogmatic ritual practice?
Yeah, so, oh, that's the word right there, right? A dogma. Right. So, as the temple that I'm ordained in, the Temple of Isis, we have a cute saying, I don't want to demean it, but like, we have a sweet saying that's, we practice Katma, not dogma, which is the idea that we're spirituality, right? That what it's indicating is that we have a spiritual devotion to our own ethical codes, right? Yeah. So it's very, when there's a dogma, it's a moral, and the moral is set in stone and it's dictated by someone else, right? And there's very little internal examination of less internal examination of a moral than there is of an ethic, right? So the ethic, you stand up with it because you've examined it, because you've thought of that process. So in ritual, you know, we have a lot of people experience ritual only like by watching someone do it. Or they think of their daily rituals, right? Which is not quite the same thing as like a great mystery, right? And there's something in the ritual, right? The sacred ritual, the self-prescribed ritual, that touches on that mystery, that great mystery, whatever you're reaching out to in your divinity. You know, I work with what I feel is the highest light, right? So I'm not working with, I don't, you know, let's say generational witch. Mostly we worked in the kitchen, you know, it's a strega, so it's an Italian practice. So we're working with food, you know, and feeding the family, which is interesting that you say that. But it's like, that is a consistent part of coming together. The breaking of bread is a peace act, right? It shows once you've shared meals with a community, with a group, it bonds the space, because that's one of our primal security points, right? It's part of being safe, is being able to eat. So in ritual, I feel like that is also one of our pieces that we can come to. It's like independently developed spiritual practice at its very base level. And when you get through to a point where you're able to reach a spot where you're going a little bit deeper in your meditation, right? You're able to clear your mind. That ritual practice, as soon as you like hollow out that the identified self, right? The small self, or the, we call it the ego. I don't like that word very much, because I believe ego in psychology is actually, you know, the healthy ego. So you don't really want to get rid of your ego, in my perspective. But when you develop a healthy ego and you're able to step aside from yourself and really, what I call cleaning your filter, you're able to bring in a divine essence that is very important for people to independently identify, right? Because you're pulling in something that's part of the collective unconscious, that's greater than yourself, as well as being a focus point for your whole practice, and sort of the tools that you surround yourself with can assist you in helping you stay focused and reminding you like what's really important in your space and in your time. I don't know if I got that off track a little bit, but
no. So basically it's a focus tool to remind you of what.
The great mystery. So I think that that's actually very independent on how people look at it. For me, I can speak to my practice and what I share, is that it's a focus point for me to see my connection to the divine on earth. And the divine on earth for me is represented through the feminine mother, through the divine mother, through the goddess. So that's why I make Venuses. That's why I'm ordained to Isis. That's why I just see her everywhere that I am, everywhere that I go. You see the collective mystery, right? So it's like, the interesting part, I feel like, of the Divine Mother is that she, and this is very differential from the dogma from the church that we're talking about in ritual, is that there isn't really a need for you to define her, right? So it's not like she doesn't need a name. You don't need to be listening to a preacher. You don't need to attend a church, or I should say your church is much more open format. And the way that you have conversations with the divine can be very personal, and doesn't actually have to be like it doesn't have to be a back and forth. When I say conversation, I don't mean that you have to literally have verbalization. You can, if that's your practice, but like, it's also something you can just give and receive the feeling and the essence, right? So stepping with a dogma, it's not what other people are telling you. It's what your intuitive self is telling you. And part of that engagement is actually the need to clear out space, right? Which comes back into that meditation format that you're talking about earlier. It's just like, the more you can clear space, the more your intuition, or that connection of your intuition, your gut to your greater mystery, can really come forward.
Yeah. How does this like impact the way we, because it's a type of prayer, right?
Oh yeah.
How does it impact the way we pray if the divine has no shape? Like, it seemed to be a more undefined space. So how does it affect the way we pray and what we ask for, and like, because a lot of people I see praying, oh please let me get this job, oh please let Bob be safe, oh please, it's like, it's always asking for something.
Yeah, take.
Right.
Well, you know, like I think for my practice and for what I've learned, the idea of taking care of oneself and radical self-reliance, you know, that, you know, I'm very much been a burner for a very long time, for most of my adult life, actually, and that is like radical self-reliance, but radical self-realization. You're like, okay, yeah, like the divine is here to better empower us to walk our path. So my prayers, instead of asking for things, right, I ask to be more clearly guided. Allow me to see where I'm next meant to go, where I'm next meant to take this. Like, allow me to better understand what I am doing, right? Because it's like, everything on this planet is here for us to engage with, right? It's like, things are here to be healed. Like, you came down to this planet for a reason. Like, you're here because you're meant to be on Earth, working on Earth things, right? So like, and maybe that does mean bringing an astral translation down and, you know, going into the Akashic records, and maybe your work is very astral, but you're still in a body here doing it. Like, you're meant to be here, right? So when people like want to go home to, you know, Alpha Centauri, it's like, I get it. Things are really difficult here, but you wouldn't have shown up if you weren't supposed to be here, working right here in your body, right? And helping everyone as you do it. So yeah, so instead of asking like what the divine can do for you, ask what you can do for the rest of the planet. I think, you know, it's like, if you're on a walk and you feel guided to take a stone, or you are gifted a feather from the universe, like maybe also pick up that soda can you saw, or that energy bar wrapper, right? Because it's like, it's an exchange of care.
So how do people like begin to set up these ritualistic spaces? Like, you know, people are all stuck at home. They might feel disconnected from, well, everything.
Yeah.
And this notion of a non-religious, sacred, ritualistic space, is it like, you know, like the Thais do? They have the little temple space and put a little Buddha on it, and it's up in the like shelf somewhere high. But I mean, or is it the whole place?
Yes, yes, that's one way to do it. I think a lot of people, particularly people who are minimalists, will really want something more like you would see in Thailand, or in a restaurant. You know, a Thai restaurant is like basically where you know, most of us would interact with that. Is like, there's a spot for it, right? There's a shrine, and I think that's, you know, contiguous throughout like all practices, right? Even in the Middle Ages, the Catholics would create grottos, right? Or a chapel, right? That the noble people would go to. So yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways to approach that. I think if you're someone who needs a lot of clear table space, like definitely just like find a location, usually in your bedroom, usually something you can see from your bed. So when you go to sleep and when you wake up, it's like right there for you. to view. It doesn't have to be on your nightstand, but a lot of people's are. It can be like across from you. Maybe it's just, maybe you're at your desk a lot, you know, because there's people who are like, you know, working a lot off their computers. Like maybe it's just off to the side of that or on your bookcase.
I have one of your little goddesses on my desk at home. You know, it's the only thing I have on my
yeah, an altar is about intention, right? So it's like,
so that's what I want to ask, is like, what is the intention? What is the point of this? Like, what does it give? I mean, I know it's like we're talking about what can you give back, but people are always asking the question, what's in it for me?
Okay, well, I mean, I could flip that question on you, but I know you're supposed to be the interviewer, so I won't.
No, you do anything you want.
Well, I'll answer, and then I want you to answer, because you have her on, you naturally put her on your desk. You could put her anywhere. You could put her in a plant on your front porch. Do you know what I mean? So that's an interesting question. It's like, for me personally, and I'll start there.
Yes.
Having an altar, and I have to say I have almost too many altars. It takes up so much of my space that it sometimes brings a lack of function to my desktops. But fortunately, it's part of my art, so I kind of like, I don't know, I have an agreement with the altars that I have to have a desk spot. But the thing about having altars is it gives a place for the eye to rest, and a place for the self to be reminded that there's a greater peace, right? Because it's unbelievably easy to lose that focus, to lose the meditation in the moment. And that's why we have, you know, malas that like are very popular to wear, because it's like every time I feel it or see it, I remember my prayer, right? So it's like, it's very similar for me to wear a mala as it is to have an altar. And for me, they come alive in a certain sense, that there's a way that that energetic focus and that prayer that I put into the altar building and the maintaining of that space with having, you know, a bowl of water, or I actually much more prefer having a vase of flowers, because that adds the water element as well as like a living piece. So it's like there's something to maintain. You can have living plants on it, right? So it gives life to that space, gives stability to that space, and it keeps bringing that prayer in. The more that you focus and work on that altar space and work with it, the more total and larger the aura or space of that altar creates. And then you are pulled out of that mundane worry or struggle, or just that daily plodding along, right? You're reminded that you are part of that mystery, that like, that is the most important part, is that you are here on this planet to do something. And it's not just that mundane piece. And that doesn't mean you can't go to the movies, or, well, now we can't go to the movies, but that doesn't mean you can't watch Netflix or, you know, enjoy a cup of wine. It just means that like, to view your life in balance, you know, and to have that focus point of healing, right, in your life.
Yeah. It seems like you're also saying that the altars themselves are kind of like breadcrumbs to find your way home.
Yeah, and I feel like that brings us to sort of into the sensation-based experiential spaces and installations. And I believe that, you know, we talk about things like, well, I mean, like, I'll just Meow Wolf, which I don't have anything to do with, unfortunately, but you know, they have it's all about like that immersion, right? And it's not, you know, it's very body oriented, but it's not specifically spiritual. I mean, there are some spiritual ritualistic performances that happen, but it's more about being immersed in this completely transformed space that just, it sort of unhooks part of your mind that says, everything is this one way, you know, everything is mundane, everything is just plodding along and, you know, going to Target for underwear, like this, like, you know, the boring shit that you don't actually want to do. And like it just takes that out. It's just, it's like, no, like this can be different. Your whole surroundings can be different. You can blow your own mind, right? And every time we have an experience that puts us back in our body and is like, opens us up, the synapses reconnect, right, to all these other experiences. So every time you have an experiential moment, you are reigniting the synapse connections of amazement and transformation and just like how important and how different and how strange the world is and how much we can grow and change and all these weird things. Look at all these people doing weird, cool things. It's like, I can do weird, cool things, right? And for me, when I create these temple spaces, it's like, it's not even really about somebody even actively worshiping, although that's, you know, gives me this amazing pleasure to see people really like feeling it and seeing it and knowing what to do, without wording, without a stein, you know, just like coming in and they just feel it, they know it, right? And they are able to do that without any instigation and or direction. And love that. It's just about people entering the space and getting this body sensation. It doesn't really matter to me whether or not they're worshiping, you know, or they see the spiritual connection or they feel the divine or they know what ritual is. I want them to feel something a little different, because every time we kind of reconnect those synapses, it changes your mind and it gives you a bigger doorway to reconnect and to keep changing your mind, keeps your brain flexible, right?
Now, how does this relate to like the future of space creation? We talked about Meow Wolf and the immersion of having actual spaces, but you know, very soon we're going to have these digital spaces where you can immerse yourself in. Are these going to enable the same sort of presencing that happens with actual spaces? Or is there a nutrification? Is there a nullification that happens in the digitization of presence?
No, that's a good question. I think that there's a number of ways to look at it. I do personally believe in installation art. It's so important for me to for people to feel and touch, like do all of the sensations of immersion and to really feel in their body. So one thing I'm concerned about is with the, you know, going into VR practice is that we're not going to have the touch sensation, right? The world itself visually can be stunning. You can still, in a VR sensation, if everyone has their own equipment at home, like you can't affect smell, right? You can't offer them something to eat or drink. They're not in a collective space, right? There's nothing to touch. There's no pillows. You can't provide pillows to sit on, right? So it's like it's different. You put it that way. It's different.
Obviously there's difference with having social and other beings.
Yeah.
I suppose I was talking more about creating a space inside your house where you've made it sacred and blah blah blah, versus just putting your Oculus on into your, you know, sacred space there, or closing your eyes and meditating. Like
Oculus rituals. I think I'd like to do some of that, actually.
I'll connect you with a programmer who'd be interested in helping you design.
That sounds awesome. I think it's different. I don't know. I couldn't determine whether it was. I think that there's going to be something missing from it, but then also there might be something that is added to it that we don't have a perspective on yet, because I don't know if I know there's people in Oculus making art. I've done a little bit, you know, I've dipped my toe into an Oculus program, but and it was amazing as a creator. And I'm interested to see you know, when I think people are already going to the spiritual end of things. Like I know I'm honestly forgetting her name, but I saw some Oculus VR programs at Mass MoCA in Massachusetts a couple of years ago. And it was just interesting. It was amazing. It was like you were flying through this weird dystopian void full of like anger and spiritual healing. And it was like, whoa, you know, but like, again, also when you wake up, you're just sitting on a chair with some little sticks. So it's like, I think the bridge for Oculus, and this is how I respond, is more about, yes, we're going to do amazing things in Oculus that can be transformative and create that sensation base, but like, how are we going to take it out of Oculus, right? Like, how are we going to reassociate that we don't have to be in Oculus to get that sensation?
And that's an interesting question, which seems to come from a lot of these gatherings that we're having before, obviously, all the shutdown. A lot of the conscious gatherings, like we were at one in 1440. I think last time I saw you, because I saw you after some goddesses. But we were at one, and everyone was talking the talk, and it was all great and what have you. And then everyone parts, and there's like it's like back to normal. It's like, where's all the magic that you were all creating together? So how do we take the ritual experience and apply it to our life? How do we yeah, how's the application without just constantly being in ritual? Or is that the key, to just constantly be in ritual?
Well, I think that I mean, if we're looking around the fact that we're in a very isolated moment in history, I do think that it's about bringing ritual into your own lives, right? And this is like, people are like, okay, well, how do I do that, right? And it's like, well, a really good place to start is building an altar. So back to my point is that, like, it's a really good place to focus, right? Because it's, you know, they say that people who work from home need some place to go work. You can't just work on your bed, right? Or in your kitchen table. You have to have an office. Well, I feel like everybody's different, but like, that's one of the things that people work from home practitioners have communicated to me.
Yes.
So yeah, and that's why I like going to cafes, which is not available anymore. So we have to rectify that part too. But the interesting part is just like with your spiritual practice, it's like, where do you put your yoga mat out when you're doing a couple stretches in the morning? It's like, it's nice to just have a yoga space where your mat can just be out, right? Or just be rolled up in that moment so you can take it out. It's like, and that space is a great space to put an altar, right? Because you're doing your other spiritual practice, which gets you into your body. You know, the asanas can be very Pilates-like, right? But like, bring it back in. Remember, like, at the beginning of your practice, and it doesn't have to be a huge spiritual thing where you're talking to some massive divine entity that you'd have no clue about. It can just be you talking to yourself. Like, that's really about you getting in your body and creating this space that develops and reminds you of being in your own integrity, right? So it's really about creating that form of ethics, right? So I think that independent ritual is really about that. You know, a lot of people, particularly, you know, like I was raised very pagan. I was raised in the woods. I was raised going to pagan rituals, you know, as a group. So like, for me, I'm like, what do you mean? How do you find ritual? God, you're going to have to avoid them. But something, if that's not a practice that was very abundant in your life, like with most people, just even taking that 15 minutes in the morning to take I'm not even saying don't drink your coffee. I drink coffee. Bring your coffee to that safe space, right, with you, and just sit. It's not even about clearing your mind. It's not even about the meditation. It's about you observing your altar space and really creating that practice of tending to that space, right? You wipe the dust off of it. You sit with it. At night, you light a candle and you sit with that candle lit. You burn some incense. You contemplate the things that are spinning through your head, and you dissect them and you put them to bed and you process them. You know, it's very much the clearing your mind can do a lot for the ritual practice. And I do think it's important to have a group ritual practice if that's something that's calling to you, right? I don't know if it's deeply important for every person to have a group ritual practice. I think it's important for every person to have community, to have healthy community, in which they're putting back into the planet or putting back into society somehow. Because that allows us to have greater reflection on our own practice.
There's a lot of power in the group, and I want to get to that. But just before we do, so people now, let's say they want to create an altar, a space where they can sit and contemplate and tend to, so that they can honor their integrity and who they are and who they're bringing. What would they put at that altar? And I know the answer is individual, but what's the breadth of options that they could put at the altar? I mean, could they?
Shameless self-promotion.
Oh, I see. Yeah. You're But could they put a picture of their mum, or
yes,
if they wanted?
Yes, completely. I would say that's actually a fantastic way to start. I would say first, get a little table. Even get your yoga block that you don't ever use. Like get something like that, right? And you have a little surface that's up off the ground. You can do it on the ground, but it just helps. It helps to kind of isolate a space, right? So you get a little end table, maybe a piece of fabric that means a lot to you, like a little altar cloth, but that could be a scarf that's very special that you don't use a lot. That could be, it could just be something you go out and you really like and you find it at a store. It could be part of a tapestry. Heck, it could be somebody, who you cared about in the past, and it's like their old shirt. It's like really all about your independent practice, right? It's about what you find
something that you feel special. Something that
a piece of fabric. I know this sounds strange. And if the fabric's not your thing, that's fine. Just clean off the counter. You wipe it down, maybe with some essential oils. Mm-hmm. Just get it clean, get that space neutralized and clean. And I would say a good starter would be, people really enjoy crystals. Get a little crystal. It helps the space. It feels good. Like whether you believe in the energetics or not is really independent and up to you. I would say maybe a plant if it's in the right place in the room, or flowers, or even fake flowers. It's like in my big installations, I don't really have the resources or the time, and sometimes they're up for a very long time. So I just use recycled fake flowers. I go to a secondhand store and I just get some very nice looking fabric flowers.
Real flowers don't really work at Burning Man, do they?
No, and also I feel weird about the fake flowers too, because then they make moop and they get all over. But whatever. Maybe it's a beautiful stick that you found in a river. Do you know what I mean? Maybe it's a rock that you found on the street. I know this sounds weird, but it's like things that aesthetically please you, that remind you of a good experience, right? And in that, your ancestors, right? So maybe it's your mom. She didn't have to be gone. It can be just a picture of your mother, a picture of your mother and father, a picture of past loved ones, of your grandparents, of your children, of your dog. Really, that's a really important part. And a lot of altars are based around ancestor connections, ancestor worship.
So something that reminds you of a good experience. What are the other dynamics? Like something you respect?
Yeah, a lot of people have image of the Maharaji or something like that, right? It's like people who are, or a photograph of Ram Dass, right? Who's not particularly associated to you, but someone who reminds you of that ideal that you like to set.
Okay. So these are very affirmative, positive things. Is there any room for shadow stuff on an altar?
Definitely. I would say if you're doing if you're just starting to build an altar, I would say put the positive things in first and have the shadow stuff come in second when your altar is really firm, because it's I think that this is a lot of what happens with bypassing actually, is that people come into their practice and then you really do need a concrete foundation to support yourself, right, emotionally, because you need to be looking upwards and forwards in development, and then people just they get that ecstatic connection to the divine, that first light of like your kundalini rising, and then people, they just shoot right off to the moon, and they don't want to come back down and deal with the first chakra, the second chakra, the third chakra, and the, you know, and it's just very like, yes. And part of practice is to deal with the home grounding, right? So there's place for shadow, but I feel like, and I definitely have a lot of shadow objects on specific altars. I have about 16 altars in my home base room. It's just, nobody needs to know that, but it's like the bookcase just became altars basically, and all the tables. But
I think this is why I like your
yeah, I have a specific space for it. You know, like letters that were hard. If you've ever received a hard letter from somebody, or good letters, but like a hard letter, or a hard letter you've written to somebody, sometimes I'll have that envelope and I'll put it under something that I feel really good about.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, it's in the center of the altar. It's under my goddess. It's under the crystal. It's under a picture of my dad or something like that, right? So it's like, it gives you, there's like a strength point, right? And it's reminding you like, this piece is here. And every so often you might be like, what's that? And you pick it out and you're like, oh, it's that letter.
Right.
Yay.
And it's not to repress it, right? It's to honor it.
Yeah. Say, this is important. This got deep, right? This went deep. So like, what do I do to process that? And sometimes holding like a little cauldron of, or like a box of, it can even be a shoebox, right? Of these shadow pieces near our altars in these special spaces, it allows us to go in the future. And when we're through processing that, or we feel like we need a catharsis with it, you know, we can go and bring that into ritual and say goodbye to it, and to burn it or to bury it, right? And in the ground to process, not bury it emotionally, but like as they come up, right? So instead of immediately chucking out that hard letter, like, because sometimes we don't know what we're reading when we read a difficult note. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I do this a lot. Like I have to go back and reread it, because like I was so distraught that I don't even know what the person really was telling me. Right. So it's like, it's important to kind of refresh this, but not to torture yourself, right? Just to refresh it, to understand, to process. And ritual can help with that. Right.
Wonderful. So, I mean, by the way, the other Elizabeth, Huebner, said she had a dream last night of you and her building a temple around you, incredible altars. So she had that dream last night. So the altars, they're almost like, because they're not physically structured, and directed, are they like beyond time? Are they like warp tunnels where you can go and kind of visit like the future and the past? Do you think they're good sort of pivot points for that?
That's the next temple I'm going to build. Temple of Time. Yes, I think all ritual practice is a combination of bring ourselves into presence, but you know, we're talking about honoring generations past, honoring generations in the future. It's really about that connection. And like, why else will we be here working with what is present, but to honor what's our ancestors and to bring it forward, right? Everyone wants better for their next generation. And it's like, we can't be any different. Even if like, I don't have children, it doesn't matter if you literally have a future ancestor. It's like, you are part of a human collective.
Right.
Like, you have ancestors in the future, even if they're not coming from directly your body.
Yes.
And you have people that you came from and ancestors that may not be genetically related, that you need to honor those elders, and you need to honor the future, right? You need to so important. So yeah, and the altar itself can be a representation of that. I think it's really all about what people need to remember.
I love this word honoring, because there is something in the spiritual bypass that disregards it, and in the, only looking at the good things, the light, and not looking at the shadow. And this is one of the things I wanted to say about your sculptures. I find them very shadow and light. Maybe you can hold one up so we can see, but I find them kind of like, sort of like dark and evil, and most glorious light and
she's
shine.
not evil, but yeah, she's a little dark.
I mean,
Everything.
Like the full. I feel that the full eclipse of light and dark.
Yeah, well, and it's something that, you know, and in my practices over the years, like I've heard a lot of people talk and gone to a lot of speeches and a lot of you know, different conversations. And it's something I picked up when I was, God, I guess I was in New York City and I must have been 19 or 20. I was at the Chapel of Sacred Mirrors in their Chelsea location. And I believe it was Alex Gray, and he was talking about how important, like the reason that they took on the name Gray as their last name was because it's about the spectrum. Like their practice is about extending that spectrum and looking at both the light and the dark and being in the center, being balanced, right? So that really resonated with me, and that didn't start appearing, you know, in my practice. I wasn't like, that's my goal. I definitely went very much into the light, because when you're working with you know, divine angelic figures, like it's like, oh, right? And and I've also been, and I think that was so deeply because I was in so much mourning for the planet as a teenager. Like I went into a lot of depression because it was very much, I was seeing what was happening with the planet, and I really didn't know how to express that. I didn't know how to change it. I didn't know what was going on. I was, you know, and you know, when you're a teenager, like it all goes inwards, right? It all goes inwards. So you're just like, oh, why am I angry? And, you know, like I'm angry because the planet's falling apart.
Right.
But then like, and I don't know what to do. Right. So I think that that's what brings spiritual practice into it, is that like, you have to find balance before you can really help.
And in order to find balance, you have to have acceptance, because you can't reject.
Yeah.
Balanced.
Yes, and when you find balance, you have to realize that that is in fact a practice, and that you are going to be doing that for the rest of your life. Like it is not enlightenment is not an achievable solid state. You know, and it's like, and by no way do I think I've achieved enlightenment, like at all. But the practice is to go forward towards balance, right? And I think a lot of people are like, oh, I've almost killed my ego, and you're like, just by saying that, no. Sorry, but like I understand, right? But it's like we need to move forward, right? So, and I think that the goddesses, I'll lift her up a little bit, the goddesses are for me a earthly reminder, right, to achieve balance, to be more at union with the self and the body. You'll like this one. This lady,
love that one.
Yeah, this is one of the big ones. She takes so much time to dry and to be careful with, but she's about community. So she's got a whole bunch of different icons on her, but right up here at her neck, I've got all these little goddesses surrounding the big goddess, and the little coco pellies.
That's brilliant. You know? I'm loving the new tattoos that the goddesses are getting.
Thank you. Yeah, I was so concerned when I started putting little animal heads on them and using different stamps and types of scratches that they would be too cute, right? And I'm like, no, it's not cute. It's primal. It's serious. And then I realized that there was nothing I could do to make them not primal.
Right.
Because I'm not that type of sculptor.
You have any of your triad ones there?
Oh yeah. She's a little cutie. I've got a whole bunch of these coming out. A couple of them are already sold. This one's already sold. It's just to one of my roommates.
I'm loving. Can you say something about the evolution of how you've gone from the 2 to the 3? Like what's in the 3 that's magic?
Well, there's a couple stories of that. So, you know, in that release of me being so concerned that they weren't going to look primal enough, and I just was like, okay, like when you look at the Paleolithic goddesses, like they're kind of abstract. They also have this parthenogenic aspect where they are both female and male, right? So a lot of the goddesses actually, they'll have breasts, they'll have a booty, they'll have hips, they'll have a vulva, all these things. Then they also are like shaped like a phallus, right? So you just can't avoid seeing it. The Paleolithic people. But that expression, right, is so interesting and so valid, right? It's like, particularly in this day and age where we're like questioning what gender even means, we really want to like extend ourselves, right? We want to like see something bigger, and the Paleolithic people really were pretty open-minded about everything. Because I think they were just on the age, they realized, you know, there was lots of ritual in their lives, there was lots of like looking for primal security, right? Like food, water, shelter, like you know, basic needs and basic community, right? So it wasn't like they didn't have a problem with the idea that they had to be in a group, because being in a group was the only way to survive. Whereas like now we're so disconnected from our survival of like how we harvest food, right? Although people are now doing gardens and baking bread, which is great. First step. But the, you know, understanding where all of that comes from is such an important part of community. And you value community so much more when you realize that like your neighbor is the baker, right? So you can't have an argument with your neighbor if you want bread. You know what I mean? You know, like, unless you want to go grind the grain, you know, and it's like, anyway, but bring back to the goddesses, like these Paleolithic pieces, they're so abstract that I was just like, okay, like, why? There's no rules. Like, why? Nobody's created a rule set. I'm not in grad school. I don't have to explain this to anybody. Like, I don't have to prove anything. Like, they've already got like alien animal heads. Like, why am I holding back, right? And like, and animals have like six breasts. Like, why am I? And actually, I brought one of those out. Let's see, this little kitty. The interesting part of creating different levels of goddesses and different types of goddesses is that they all can turn out a little bit differently, right? So this is a recent one. It's the little kitty cat. She is also already purchased. Sorry, world.
Three lots of twos.
Yeah, lots of twos. Well, you know, cats have 6 tits. Like, that's the thing. Most animals do, because they have litters. So they need to have, you're supposed to have, evolutionarily, you're meant to have two mammaries for every child that you have, right? So if the cat has, like, vaguely, right? So the cat might have more,
right?
But you know, the whole idea is to have enough to go around, enough milk to go around.
And how have you noticed the difference in these, like having 2 versus 3 versus 6, like?
Well, sometimes it's guided by myth. Sometimes it's just an intuitive piece where I'm just like, okay, this is a little cat goddess, and I have a cat goddess that has 3 breasts, right? But it's not quite the same thing as the cat goddess with 6 breasts.
Right. So that's what I'm asking. It's like, for you to sit with them in an altar space, how are you finding the difference?
Oh, I think that it's a lot like each and everything is different, right? So it's like the 2-breasted goddesses really associate with our human bodies, right? Because, you know, most of us have 2 breasts, you know, male or female, or
there's a lot of 2s going on.
Yeah, a lot of 2s. Yeah, a lot of balance, 2 hands. Well, you know, but the animals have 4 paws, right? So it's like, I don't know. There's a lot of 2s, but like there's also that has a lot to do with our bipedal nature, right? And like our need to extend. So we're like 2 hands and 2 sets of whatever, 2 nostrils, right? It's a redundancy in order to keep us alive, right? And there's a this isn't specifically the representation of the Italian goddess, but I try to draw a lot on my European Paleolithic ancestry, because I'm mostly European, melange, and rather than taking from other cultures, although all cultures across the globe have different types of goddesses from around the Paleolithic period.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the same in Japan, Africa, Indonesia, South America. So in Italy, there is a goddess who she is has 3 breasts, and she is the goddess of nursemaids and midwives, and they 2 breasts were for milk and 1 was for wine, although you can hear people have said the other direction as well.
Right.
You know, like now we wouldn't serve wine to babies to get them to go to sleep, but like back in, you know, ancient Rome, they weren't talking about full-blown wine either. Do you know? It's like people are so, it was watered down because there wasn't any clean water. So it's like, that's why. But that being said, 2 for milk, 1 for wine. And that's what the 3rd breast was in this goddess. So that's sort of, you know, when the coronavirus was going through Italy, I was thinking a lot about, because I've traveled there a lot, and a lot of my research of like ancient peoples comes from Italy and Malta and like that whole region, and I've been to a lot of the sacred sites there. I really, you know, I was feeling the heaviness of that and feeling the struggle of my cousins, like my actual cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And it was really, it's so hard to sit with that. And I was just like, how, like, and I just kept thinking like, there must be a 3-breasted goddess. Like I can just see her. Anyway, so it's like that translation moved through. And so a lot of the goddesses are having 3 breasts now. A lot of the goddesses are having 6 breasts. You know, the next big one I do is probably going to have like,
9.
I don't know, 9, 12, 15.
This is great. So tell us about, it's been so lovely having you on, Elizabeth. Tell us about what are you doing online? How can people get in touch, and what are you doing, sort of like online consultations to help people build altars and ritual spaces? Because if you're not, I think that would be great.
Well, I have not done online consultations to do that. I have helped a number of people build their own altars, like when we were allowed to, you know, see each other in real time. I'm currently in the space I'm living in. I'm helping create some installation spaces around here right now. Definitely just getting in contact with me through, I know that sounds strange, but my Instagram or my Facebook is really the way to do it. Or my website has all of my contact information, has my Google number is on there, so you can just give a call directly to my Google number.
Right.
I don't publish my actual number, but you can find me on WhatsApp. I believe that all of my Facebook things call right through to my WhatsApp. So I'm very accessible, and I'm really here. I'd love to help anybody go through any process with their altar building. Mostly I'm just selling these little goddesses and being delighted by people send back photos of usually the goddesses, like no matter what else is happening on their altar, the goddesses are like the dead center, which I'm just like, oh, that's so sweet. So kind of like they are on your desk. Yeah.
Well, you know, I got 3 off you. I gave 1 to my mum. It's her favorite thing.
Oh.
She only has like 3 or 4 things that she cherishes, and I've bought her 2 of them. One was a big fat goddess that I found in Colorado, and the other one was yours. So how do people see all the different goddesses that you've got? They're on your website.
They're not all, that's not you'll see some of them on my website, but they sell relatively quickly. So the best way to do it is to go onto Venus_cult on Instagram. And I also I push the images out to my Facebook page and to my different Facebook groups. So really the best way to buy it is just by following me on Instagram and Facebook, and even just I'm doing some different called custom work.
Right.
So yeah, you can just be like, you know what, I have a vision of a pig goddess and I really need that pig goddess, and I'd be like, okay, like we'll talk about size and price, and you know, they're hand built, and so the turnaround time is not like Amazon, but
well, it is like how Amazon is now. Low ads.
Yeah, you'll get it in a couple weeks, but I'm pretty clear about my timelines. Yeah,
that's fantastic. I've actually got some ideas I want to do. I want to do a 2, a 3, and a 9.
Oh yeah, 9. That's a good
like as a set, as a kind of like an evolution, and we'll talk about it. But it's been so wonderful having you on, Elizabeth. All my experiences with you are so deep and transition. Thank you for all the wonderful space holding, and you know, you process so much in your work for others and for the collective that it's, you know, that is seen inside your art, both in the goddesses and in the spaces you create.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I hope that you know, the Divine Temple can come on here and talk a little bit more directly about that, the weaving and creation of that, so you get a little bit more about the installation practice that Elizabeth and I do.
Exactly. We'll do an Elizabeth squared experience. Oh, okay.
We worked out that. All right. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. It is such a pleasure. I'm just going to close out the show. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Oh, wow. What a wonderful show with Elizabeth. And it's, you know, it's so simple that we miss it, again, with the obvious things, that holding these spaces of, holding ritual spaces in our sacred space, in our home, in our bedroom, creating these beacons, reminders of something beyond the flutter of what's going on and what am I going to do here. It reminds us of something that's eternal, that's beyond time, that connects us to the divine. And that's the point of these beacon points, these altar points, to remind us to reconnect to the divine, and to honor that thing beyond our microcosm of Markovadi's life, which is the smidgen of eternity. And the divine is in the eternity. So if we can access that eternity and remember we are part of the eternity, then we cease to bicker over these, oh no, that's my special cup. Don't fucking give a shit. You know, what is important is your fundamental aspect of creation, the divine presence. And that is represented in that divine feminine, that space. And it's not like women versus men. It's the divine space, the universal principle. And by creating these spaces that allow us to remember our own integrity, our own ethical presence, which is fundamentally at the background love. It's love. And if we can all remember that, we're done. I mean, we're Garden of Eden again. We're it. As opposed to this, no, I have to go to war over my cup. Come on, we're done. And it's okay. So, such a pleasure. Temple builders are so important, and there is a re-emergence of this, the importance of these temple builders. And we all can be temple guardians of our own divine space. And I think that's what's important to recognize. So get in touch with Elizabeth, get one of her temple goddess devils. I like it because there's this yin yang thing. And she can help you as well, build your space. And if in doubt, just make something pretty in the corner and put stuff on it that you honor, that you love, that you think, every time I look at that, I have a lovely warm feeling. It could be anything. It could be the Pope if you're Catholic. Do it. It doesn't matter. You know, the point is that you are remembering, becoming a member again of honoring what is divine for you. And ultimately, behind the story of what's divine for you is the divine for everyone. It's all the same divine. Cool. Good. My name's Mark Abadi. I have a book, Book Evolve, bookevolve.com. You can check it out. been wonderful. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please like, share, do all that fun stuff. Did I say that? Mark Abadi, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.